I was 23 when my sister Sarah destroyed the most important presentation of my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because what happened that day changed everything between us forever. Growing up in suburban Cleveland, Sarah and I were only 2 years apart, but we might as well have been from different planets. She was the golden child, blonde, bubbly, effortlessly charming. I was the quiet one, the one who preferred books to parties, who found solace in theater rehearsals rather than high school football games. Our parents never said it outright, but I always felt like Sarah got the sunshine while I got the shadows. Theater became my refuge early on. While Sarah was cheerleading and dating the quarterback, I was spending my afternoons in the dusty drama room, learning lines and losing myself in other people's stories. It felt safer that way. In someone else's skin, I could be brave, confident, beautiful. Everything I didn't feel like in my own life. Mrs. Henderson, our drama teacher, saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. She'd pull me aside after rehearsals, her weathered hands gentle on my shoulders. "You have a gift, Emma," she'd say. "Don't let anyone dim that light." At the time, I thought she was just being kind. I didn't understand that she was preparing me for a lifetime of people trying to do exactly that. College brought freedom I'd never tasted before. At Ohio State, I threw myself into the theater program with an intensity that surprised even me. I wasn't just good, I was exceptional. My professors noticed. My classmates noticed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living in Sarah's shadow. I was creating my own light. That's where I met David Chen. He was a year ahead of me, studying directing, and he had this quiet intensity that drew me in immediately. We'd spend hours in the empty theaters, talking about Chekhov and Sondheim, about the way a single spotlight could change the entire meaning of a scene. He wasn't just my best friend, he was my artistic soulmate, the person who understood my dreams before I even voiced them. David believed in me in a way that felt revolutionary. When I doubted myself, he'd remind me of that night I'd performed Lady Macbeth for our advanced acting class, how I'd made hardened theater majors weep. When I felt invisible, he'd tell me about the way I commanded attention the moment I stepped on stage. He saw me, really saw me, and that changed everything. After graduation, David moved to New York to pursue his directing career. I stayed in Cleveland, telling myself I needed to save money, that I wasn't ready for the big city. The truth was, I was terrified. David would call me from his tiny Brooklyn apartment, describing auditions and workshops, the electric energy of off-Broadway theaters. "Come to New York," he'd say. "You're ready." But fear kept me anchored to familiar ground. I took a job at a local marketing firm, telling myself it was temporary. The work was mind-numbing, creating campaigns for car dealerships and restaurant chains, but it paid the bills. I kept auditioning for local theater, landing small roles here and there, but nothing that felt significant. I was treading water, and I knew it. Sarah, meanwhile, had followed her own path. She'd majored in communications at a smaller college, and after graduation, she'd moved back home and started working at a local television station. She was doing well. Not spectacular, but well. She'd gotten engaged to her college boyfriend, Brad, and they were planning this elaborate wedding that dominated every family dinner conversation. I should have been happy for her. But watching her settle into this comfortable, conventional life, while I struggled to find my footing, felt like salt in an old wound. She made everything look so easy, so effortless. Even when she complained about work or wedding planning, it felt performative, like she was playing a role rather than actually suffering. The opportunity that changed everything came on a rainy Tuesday in March. I was sitting in my gray cubicle, staring at mock-ups for a plumbing company's spring promotion, when my phone rang. It was David, and his voice was crackling with excitement. "Emma," he said, "I have incredible news. I'm directing a new play. It's called The Weight of Memory, and it's going to be produced by the Riverside Theater. We're talking about a full production, professional cast, the works. And I want you to audition for the lead." My heart stopped. The Riverside Theater wasn't just any venue. It was one of the most respected regional theaters in the Midwest. They'd launched careers, won awards, attracted attention from New York scouts. This was the kind of opportunity I'd dreamed about since I was 14 years old. "There's a catch," David continued. "The audition is happening in 2 weeks, and it's invitation only. I had to fight to get you on the list. The role is perfect for you, Emma. It's a woman dealing with family trauma, finding her voice, breaking free from the expectations that have held her back. You were born to play this part." I barely remember the rest of the conversation. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. This was it. My chance to prove that all those years of small roles in local theater hadn't been wasted. My chance to show everyone, including myself, what I was really capable of. The next 2 weeks became a blur of preparation. I threw myself into the script with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I studied every line, every subtext, every emotional beat. I worked with a coach David recommended, spent hours in front of my bedroom mirror, practicing monologues until my voice was hoarse. I even took time off work, claiming I had the flu, so I could focus entirely on the audition. The character, Helena, was complex in ways that both thrilled and terrified me. She was a woman who'd spent her life accommodating others, dimming her own light to make everyone else comfortable. But over the course of the play, she found her voice, her power, her truth. It was like David had written the role specifically for me. I didn't tell my family about the audition at first. The fear of their reactions, of their potential disappointment if I didn't get the part, felt too heavy to bear. But as the date approached, I found myself needing to share the news with someone. So I called Sarah. Her reaction was complicated. She seemed excited, but there was something else underneath, a tension I couldn't quite identify. She asked a lot of questions about the play, about David, about what this opportunity could mean for my career. I found myself getting caught up in her enthusiasm, sharing details I might have kept private otherwise. "That's amazing, Em," she said finally. "I'm so proud of you. And you know what? This gives me an idea. I've been looking for a way to create some original content at the station. Maybe I could do a feature about local artists pursuing their dreams. Would you be okay if I filmed your audition preparation? It could be great exposure for you." I should have said no. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to keep this private, to protect this fragile, precious opportunity from outside interference. But Sarah's enthusiasm felt genuine, and the idea of exposure did appeal to me. Maybe having a camera crew there would make me feel more professional, more legitimate. So I agreed, and that decision haunts me to this day. The week leading up to the audition was a whirlwind of activity. Sarah and her cameraman, a quiet guy named Mike, followed me around as I prepared. They filmed me rehearsing, working with my coach, even getting my hair and makeup done. Sarah conducted interviews, asking me about my dreams, my fears, my hopes for the future. Looking back, I can see the red flags I missed. The way Sarah's questions sometimes felt more like interrogations than interviews. The way she seemed more interested in my anxieties than my excitement. The way she kept pushing me to talk about failure, about what I'd do if I didn't get the part. But I was so focused on the audition, so consumed by my own preparation, that I didn't pay attention to the warning signs. I trusted my sister. Despite our complicated history, despite the way she'd overshadowed me for so many years, I believed she wanted me to succeed. The audition was scheduled for a Monday morning at the Riverside Theater. I'd driven by the building countless times over the years, but I'd never been inside. Walking through those doors felt like stepping into a cathedral. The lobby was elegant but understated, with black and white photographs of past productions lining the walls. I could smell the phantom scent of stage makeup and dust that seems to live in every theater. David was waiting for me in the lobby, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. He pulled me aside before we went into the audition room. "Emma, I need you to know something," he said. "The board is taking a risk on you. You don't have the extensive resume that some of the other candidates have. But I've talked you up, convinced them that you have something special. This audition isn't just about getting the part. It's about proving that I was right to believe in you. The weight of that responsibility should have crushed me. Instead, it felt liberating. For the first time in my life, someone had taken a professional risk on me. Someone believed in my talent enough to put their own reputation on the line. The audition room was smaller than I'd expected, with just a few chairs arranged in a semicircle. The creative team was there: David, the producer, the artistic director, and a few other people I didn't recognize. They were all watching me with polite, professional interest, and I felt their expectations like a physical weight. I'd prepared 3 monologues, but they only asked for 1. I chose Helena's climactic speech from Act 2, the moment where she finally stands up to her controlling family and declares her independence. It was a piece I'd connected with on a visceral level, and I knew I could deliver it with the raw honesty it required. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let Helena take over. The words flowed out of me like water breaking through a dam. I felt every emotion Helena felt: the years of suppressed anger, the fear of disappointing people, the desperate need to be seen and heard and valued. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then David smiled, and I knew I'd done something right. The rest of the audition was a blur of scene work and callbacks. They had me read with different actors, try different interpretations, explore different emotional colors. I felt like I was flying, like every skill I'd developed over the years was finally coming together in perfect harmony. When it was over, David walked me to my car. He was trying to play it cool, but I could see the excitement in his eyes. "Emma," he said, "I can't make any promises, but that was extraordinary. You brought something to that character that I didn't even know was there. The board is going to have a hard time saying no to you." I drove home in a daze, replaying every moment of the audition in my head. I felt like I'd finally stepped into my own skin, like I'd found the person I was meant to be. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about Sarah or my parents or anyone else's expectations. I was just Emma, and Emma was enough. That night, I called Sarah to tell her how it went. She seemed genuinely excited for me, asking for every detail. I found myself reliving the entire experience through her questions, feeling the rush of adrenaline all over again. The next few days passed in a haze of anxious waiting. David had warned me that the decision-making process could take time, that the board would need to meet and discuss all the candidates. But every time my phone rang, my heart jumped. Then, on Thursday afternoon, David called with the news that changed everything. "Emma," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Congratulations, the part is yours." I screamed. I actually screamed, right there in my cubicle, loud enough that half the office turned to stare at me. I didn't care. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and congratulations. My parents were shocked but proud. My theater friends were thrilled. Even my boss, who'd been less than understanding about my time off, seemed impressed when I told him I'd be leaving to pursue a professional acting opportunity. But the call I was most excited about was the one to Sarah. She was at work when I reached her, but she put me on speakerphone so her colleagues could hear the news. The entire newsroom erupted in cheers, and I felt like I was floating on air. Sarah immediately started talking about the documentary she'd been putting together about my audition process. She wanted to film my reaction to getting the part, to capture the moment when my dream came true. It seemed like a perfect ending to her story, and I agreed without hesitation. That weekend, Sarah and Mike came over to film what she called the celebration segment. They captured me reading the contract, talking about my excitement, discussing what this opportunity meant for my future. I was so happy, so grateful, that I probably overshared. I talked about how this was my chance to prove myself, to show everyone that I wasn't just Sarah's quiet little sister, that I had something valuable to offer the world. During a break in filming, Sarah pulled me aside. "Em," she said, "I have something to tell you. The station loves what we've captured so far. They want to air the documentary as a special segment on the morning show. It could be amazing exposure for you in the play. I felt a flutter of anxiety. Television exposure was one thing, but the morning show reached thousands of people. What if I looked foolish? What if I came across as desperate or delusional? But Sarah was so enthusiastic, so convinced that this would help my career, that I pushed my doubts aside. She was my sister, and she was offering me an opportunity that most actors would kill for. How could I say no? The documentary was scheduled to air on the Friday morning before rehearsals began. Sarah had edited together a compelling narrative arc. My preparation, my audition, my triumph. She'd even gotten David to do an interview about my talent and potential. Watching the rough cut, I felt a surge of pride. This was my story, my moment, and it was being told beautifully. But there was one thing that nagged at me. In the final interview, Sarah had asked me about the other actors who'd auditioned, about how I felt knowing I'd beaten out more experienced candidates. My answer had been honest, but perhaps too revealing. I'd admitted to feeling like an imposter sometimes, to wondering if I really deserved the part. Sarah had included that clip in the documentary, and it made me uncomfortable. It felt too raw, too vulnerable. When I mentioned it to her, she dismissed my concerns. "Emma," she said, "that's what makes you relatable. People need to see that you're human, that you have doubts just like everyone else. It makes your success more meaningful." I wanted to argue, but I was so caught up in the excitement of everything that I let it go. That was my second mistake. The first was trusting Sarah in the first place. The documentary aired on a Friday morning in April. I was too nervous to watch it live, so I recorded it and planned to watch it later. But my phone started ringing before I'd even finished my coffee. The first call was from David, and his voice was tight with anger. "Emma," he said, "we need to talk. Now." My stomach dropped. "What's wrong? Did you see the documentary? Did you see what your sister did?" I hadn't, but his tone told me everything I needed to know. With shaking hands, I turned on the recording of the morning show. What I saw made me physically ill. Sarah had edited the documentary to tell a completely different story than the one I'd thought we were creating. Instead of a celebration of my success, it was a cautionary tale about nepotism and unqualified actors taking opportunities away from more deserving candidates. She'd taken my comments about feeling like an imposter and edited them to make it sound like I was admitting to being unqualified. She'd twisted David's praise into what looked like biased favoritism. She'd even interviewed other actors who'd auditioned for the role, letting them voice their disappointment and suggesting that the casting decision had been unfair. But the worst part was the ending. Instead of celebrating my achievement, Sarah had concluded the documentary with a segment about the importance of integrity in the arts, about how personal relationships shouldn't override merit. She'd essentially accused me of sleeping my way into the role, without ever saying it directly. I sat in my apartment, staring at the screen, feeling like my entire world was collapsing. This wasn't just embarrassing, it was career-ending. The documentary had painted me as a fraud, a pretty face who'd manipulated her way into a role I didn't deserve. The phone calls started immediately. First from David, then from the producer, then from other members of the creative team. The theater's board was meeting that afternoon to discuss the situation. The media attention was exactly what they didn't want for their company. I tried calling Sarah, but she didn't answer. I left message after message, my voice getting more desperate with each one. How could she do this to me? How could she destroy my dream so casually, so completely? By that evening, the decision was made. The theater was recasting the role. They couldn't afford to have their production associated with the controversy Sarah had created. They were sorry, they said, but they had to protect their reputation. David came to my apartment that night, and I'd never seen him so angry. "Emma," he said, "I fought for you. I put my reputation on the line for you. And now they're questioning my judgment, my integrity. They're wondering if I can be trusted to make casting decisions. I wanted to defend myself, to explain that I'd been betrayed just as much as he had. But what could I say? I'd allowed Sarah to film the documentary. I'd participated in my own destruction. The next few days were a nightmare. The story had been picked up by other local media outlets, and I found myself at the center of a scandal I didn't understand. People were calling me a homewrecker, a fraud, a manipulator. Strangers on social media were dissecting my appearance, my talent, my worth as a human being. I stopped leaving my apartment. I stopped answering my phone. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of humiliation and betrayal. Finally, after a week of silence, Sarah called me. "Emma," she said, and her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I need to talk to you." We met at a coffee shop downtown, in a corner booth where I hoped no one would recognize me. Sarah looked terrible, pale, hollow-eyed, like she hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't give me back my career," I replied. "Sorry doesn't undo what you did to me." She started crying then, ugly tears that made her mascara run. "I know," she said. "I know I can't fix this, but I need you to understand why I did it." I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I was jealous," she admitted. "I've always been jealous of your talent, your passion, your ability to make people feel things. I've spent my whole life being the pretty one, the popular one, the one everyone likes. But you have something real. Something I'll never have." Her words hit me like a physical blow. All those years of feeling like I was in her shadow, and she'd been jealous of me. "The documentary was supposed to be about your success," she continued. "But when I started editing it, when I saw how talented you really are, how much you deserve everything you're getting, I couldn't stand it. I wanted to hurt you the way your success was hurting me." I stared at her across the table. This person who'd shared my childhood, my DNA, my deepest secrets. I'd trusted her with my dreams, and she'd used them to destroy me. "The worst part," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "is that I immediately regretted it. The moment the documentary aired, I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. The damage was done. I wanted to forgive her. Part of me wanted to reach across the table and tell her that I understood, that jealousy makes people do terrible things, that we could find a way to move past this. But the rational part of my brain, the part that was still reeling from the devastation she'd caused, couldn't let go. "You destroyed my life," I said finally. "You took the most important opportunity I'd ever had and you turned it into a weapon against me. And for what? Because you were jealous." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I stood up from the table, my legs shaking. "I can't do this right now," I said. "I can't sit here and listen to you explain why you betrayed me. I need time to figure out how to put my life back together." Sarah reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Emma, please." "Don't," I said. "Just don't." I walked out of that coffee shop feeling like I was leaving my old life behind. The sister I'd grown up with, the family dynamics I'd accepted, the person I'd been for 23 years. All of it was gone, shattered by Sarah's jealousy and my own naivety. The next few months were the darkest of my life. I moved out of Cleveland, partly to escape the scandal, but mostly because I couldn't bear to be in the same city as Sarah. I found a small apartment in Cincinnati and took a job at a restaurant, telling myself it was temporary while I figured out my next move. But the truth was, I was broken. The documentary had done more than destroy my career. It had shattered my confidence, my ability to trust people, my belief in my own worth. I stopped auditioning, stopped performing, stopped believing that I had anything valuable to offer the world. David tried to stay in touch, but our friendship had been collateral damage in Sarah's attack. He'd moved to New York, and our conversations grew shorter and more strained until they stopped altogether. I didn't blame him. I'd cost him almost as much as I'd cost myself. For a year, I lived in a kind of emotional hibernation. I went to work, paid my bills, and tried not to think about the dreams I'd lost. Sarah called sometimes, but I never answered. My parents tried to mediate, suggesting family therapy or just a simple conversation, but I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready. The turning point came on a Tuesday evening in late fall. I was walking home from work when I passed a small community theater. There was a poster in the window advertising auditions for their winter production, and something about it made me stop. It wasn't a professional theater. It wasn't even a particularly good theater. But it was live performance, and I realized with startling clarity that I missed it. I missed the feeling of disappearing into someone else's skin, of telling stories that mattered, of connecting with an audience in that electric moment when theater really works. I stood outside that theater for 20 minutes, debating with myself. Part of me was terrified of putting myself out there again, of risking another betrayal or failure. But a bigger part of me was tired of hiding, tired of letting Sarah's jealousy define the rest of my life. I auditioned for their production of The Glass Menagerie, and I got the part of Laura. It was a small role in a small theater, but it felt like coming home. During rehearsals, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with acting in the first place. It wasn't about fame or recognition or proving myself to anyone. It was about truth, about finding the humanity in flawed characters, about creating moments of genuine connection. The production was modest, but it was good. I was good. And for the first time in over a year, I felt like myself again. After the show closed, the director approached me about auditioning for a regional theater in Columbus. It was a small part, but it was professional, and it was a chance to start rebuilding my career. I said yes. One role led to another, and slowly, carefully, I began to reconstruct my life. I wasn't the same person I'd been before Sarah's betrayal. I was warier, more guarded, more protective of my dreams. But I was also stronger, more self-reliant, more committed to my craft. It took 3 years before I felt ready to have a real conversation with Sarah. She'd been calling regularly, leaving voicemails that I deleted without listening to. But on the anniversary of the documentary airing, she sent me a letter instead. It was 20 pages long, handwritten, full of apologies and explanations, and desperate attempts to justify the unjustifiable. But buried in all that rambling was something that sounded like genuine remorse, genuine understanding of what she'd done to me. I called her that night. "Emma," she said, her voice shaking. "I can't believe you're calling me." "I'm not calling to forgive you," I said. "I'm calling because I need you to understand something." I listened. "What you did to me was unforgivable. You didn't just destroy my career. You destroyed my trust, my confidence, my ability to believe in myself. You took the most important moment of my life, and you turned it into a nightmare." "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I'm so sorry. But here's what I need you to understand," I continued. "I survived it. I'm not the same person I was before, and I'll never be that trusting again. But I survived, and I'm building something new. Something that's entirely mine." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "Are you happy?" I considered the question. I was working steadily now, mostly in regional theater, but occasionally in small film projects. I had a tiny apartment in Columbus that I decorated with posters from shows I'd been in. I was dating a lighting designer named Marcus, who made me laugh and never made me feel like I had to compete for his attention. "I'm getting there," I said finally. "I'm building a life that's mine, not a reaction to yours or anyone else's." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I left the station," she said eventually, "a few months after the documentary aired. I couldn't stand working there anymore, knowing what I'd done. I'm teaching now, elementary school. It's different. I didn't ask for details. I wasn't ready to care about her career or her choices or her attempts at redemption." "Emma," she said, "I know you can't forgive me, but I need you to know that I've spent every day since then regretting what I did. Not just because of what it cost you, but because of what it revealed about me. I was so consumed by jealousy that I was willing to destroy someone I loved just to make myself feel better. I'd heard variations of this apology before, but something in her voice was different this time. Smaller, more broken, more real. "I hope you understand someday," I said, "that this isn't about you anymore. This is about me learning to trust my own judgment, to protect my own dreams. I don't hate you, Sarah, but I can't have you in my life the way I did before." "I understand," she said. I miss you. I miss my sister. I miss her too," I replied. "But she's gone. We both killed her that day." We talked for a few more minutes, but there wasn't much left to say. When I hung up, I didn't feel the closure I'd expected. I felt hollow, but also relieved. I'd said what I needed to say, and now I could move forward without carrying the weight of unexpressed anger. That was 5 years ago. I'm 31 now, and I've built a career that I'm proud of. I'm not famous, and I probably never will be, but I work consistently. I'm respected by my colleagues, and I wake up every morning grateful for the opportunity to do what I love. Sarah and I exchange Christmas cards now, brief notes that acknowledge our continued existence without pretending we're close. I know she's married, not to Brad, but to someone else, someone who apparently appreciates her gentler nature. I know she's still teaching, still trying to figure out how to be a person she can live with. I don't know if I'll ever forgive her completely. Some betrayals are too deep, too fundamental, to overcome entirely. But I've learned to live with the scar tissue, to build a life that doesn't depend on her approval or her presence. The most important thing I've learned is that dreams are fragile things, and they need to be protected. Not everyone who claims to love you will protect your dreams. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones most threatened by your success, most likely to sabotage your happiness in order to preserve their own sense of superiority. I've also learned that survival is a choice. When Sarah destroyed my first big opportunity, I could have given up entirely. I could have let her jealousy become my reality, could have accepted that I was too naive, too trusting, too weak to succeed in a competitive industry. Instead, I chose to rebuild. It was harder the second time, lonelier, more uncertain, but it was also more authentic, more entirely mine. The career I have now is built on my own merit, protected by my own boundaries, sustained by my own determination. David and I reconnected a few years ago. He's doing well in New York, directing off-Broadway productions and teaching at a respected conservatory. When we met for coffee during one of his visits to Ohio, he apologized for the way our friendship had ended. "I should have fought harder for you," he said. "I should have stood up to the board, should have defended you more forcefully." "You did what you could," I told him. We were both victims of Sarah's jealousy. He shook his head. "I let them scare me into abandoning my friend. I've regretted it ever since. We're friends again now, though it's different than it was before. We're both more cautious, more aware of how quickly trust can be broken. But we're also more appreciative of genuine connection, more protective of the people who truly support our dreams. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never agreed to let Sarah film that documentary. Would I have had the career I originally dreamed of? Would I be on Broadway now, living in New York, accepting awards and giving interviews? But I've learned that wondering about alternate timelines is a waste of energy. The life I have now is the one I built from the ashes of my original dreams, and it's more solid, more sustainable, more truly mine than anything I could have achieved at 23. I'm performing in a production of Three Sisters next month at a theater in Cincinnati. It's a small role, but it's a beautiful play, and I'm working with people who respect my talent and my boundaries. Marcus is designing the lights, and he's created something magical for the final scene. Sarah doesn't know about the show, and I'm not going to tell her. Some parts of my life need to remain private, protected, mine alone. I've learned that love and support aren't the same thing, and that family doesn't automatically equal safety. But I'm happy. Not the wild, desperate happiness of my early 20s, but the steady, earned happiness of someone who's survived betrayal and chosen to keep believing in herself. I wake up every morning grateful for the life I've built, the people who genuinely support me, the work that still makes my heart race with possibility. My sister tried to destroy me, but she only succeeded in teaching me how strong I really am. And for that, despite everything, I'm almost grateful. I'm almost